right, ready to get into it?
Yeah.
All right, so name some of Gardner's types of intelligence. Linguistic. Spatial. Musical.
Logical, mathematical.
Oh, good, you guys are ahead of me. Awesome.
Bodily, kinesthetic.
Uh-huh.
And that's as far as I got.
All right, so we've got logical, mathematical. That's pretty obvious, math skills, but it's more than that. It's also your ability to analyze, to be logical. So an attorney, for instance, a judge, a financial advisor, people like that would lean towards those skills. Scientists may have that skill. Not all scientists have it as much as they should, but most of them, I would say, if you're a good scientist, you should have that. What is bodily kinesthetic?
Athletes.
Movement. Athletes.
Dancers.
Dancers. About coach. So you may not be a super athlete yourself, but you may be really good at understanding how to manipulate the body to be good at that.
So like personal trainers?
Personal trainer, yeah, absolutely. Even a physiologist, a doctor may have some of this intelligence. It's leaning more towards using your body, but a sports doctor, for instance, should have a really good understanding of this. What does intra mean versus inter?
Intra means outward.
Like
Opposite.
yourself. Like intra is like what's around you, and inter is like inside.
Intra is within, inter is between. Okay? So intrapersonal, what would that be? That's intelligence about what's going on inside yourself. So what does that mean?
Like a monkey.
Being able to psychoanalyze yourself so you have a good understanding of yourself. What sort of job would you have if you were really good at understanding yourself?
You could be like an analyst. If you're good at understanding yourself, you can help people relate to their own emotions and what they feel.
Possibly. Interpersonal is between people. So that's the relating to other people. You're good at relationships. So like my career, marital and family therapy, that's all about relationships. So that's interpersonal intelligence. However, I know therapists who are amazing at saving people's marriages, but they're divorced. They're bad at their own stuff. So they're high in interpersonal intelligence, but they are crappy at intrapersonal, within themselves. They don't understand what's going on in their own person. They don't have a lot of insight into their own emotions and motivations and so on. So you might be good at dealing with other people's stuff, but bad at your own, or even vice versa. Yeah.
Oh, let's wait that slide.
Oh, okay, sorry. So intrapersonal, you're really good at understanding what's going on within yourself. So you may be a monk, might have high interpersonal, a yoga instructor, a blogger. You know, they're talking about themselves. And they have a lot of insight into their own experiences in the world, and that can be very helpful for other people.
Like journalists.
A journalist, possibly, yeah. A journalist could have, especially if the type of journalism they're doing is including their own experience into
Like
that.
showing where they've been, explaining what they've seen.
Yeah, exactly. So a journalist, for instance, may be higher in intrapersonal, have some logical, mathematical going on, and then probably highest in linguistic. Yeah.
Would these be kind of like the ASVAB test?
Yes, similar to that, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. So you're not just necessarily good in one area. And you can take, for free, you can take a Gardner intelligence test online. So you can just Google that and you can take it. And then naturalist intelligence, what is that? It's not about getting naked, like growing things. That door is going to kill me. I'm going to kill it. Stop walking through this. So it's intelligence about nature. So you might be like a farmer, grow things, grow animals, grow plants. What else?
You could be like
Biologist.
Biologist, yeah.
People like take care of national parks. Like a ranger.
A forest ranger, absolutely.
A horticulturist.
Horticulturist, so growing plants, yep.
a vet.
A vet, right? So you may not even have your own. My vet doesn't have any pets, but he's really good at taking care of animals. But he's like, I deal with enough animals at my clinic. I don't want any at home. So I drive all the way down to Laguna Beach to see the vet.
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
But we have bloodhounds, and bloodhounds are very specialty dogs, and he specializes in bloodhounds. So it's worth the drive. Plus, it's an excuse to go to the beach. So win-win. And if you can believe it or not, he's cheaper than the vets up here in the desert, and better.
Oh, I can believe that. The vets up here are ridiculous.
They're ridiculous, and they're expensive, and they're stupid. So, I had a dog once that got pesticide poisoning, and I brought the dog because she was having seizures, so I brought her to the closest vet possible, and the vets wouldn't give her a bath. Like, she's pesticide. I guarantee that's what's wrong with this dog is pesticide. I've looked up all the symptoms online. He's like, well, Dr. Google isn't a veterinarian. I was like, that's it, put the dog in the car, and I'm not paying you a penny. You can sue me. Yeah. Well, I'm Dr. Harvey, so you can at least listen to me. I was like, my interpersonal intelligence was just like not helping in that situation. So you tend to be really good in one area, and then you have maybe 2, maybe 3 other subspecialties after that. And that really helps to determine the career path you're going to go down into. So if you're not sure about what job you should have, what career path you should follow, you might want to take Gardner's intelligence test and see what you're really good at. Unsurprisingly, I'm really good at interpersonal intelligence. That was my #1 rating. So it's no wonder I went into therapy eventually instead of continuing my career path into music. All right. Yeah, I love Gardner. And so the last one is this sort of tentative one that people like to argue about, and it's existential intelligence. Now, existentialism is a school of philosophy about the reality of our limited existence. That human beings struggle to deal with the fact that, yes, at some point you are going to die, and you're going to be buried in the ground, and maggots are going to eat you, and that really, we don't like that idea. Like, that's a horrible idea. And that when you die, what happens to you? It's scary, right? Even if you're a person of faith, and you believe, like, in heaven, or you're a psychologist, and I don't know what Scientologists believe will happen after they die. I'll have to look into that. If you're Mormon, you believe you'll get your own planet and be a god yourself one day. Yes. It's, right, I wouldn't mind that. What was that?
I was baptized in Mormon church. I was young. I was like 12.
Oh, you didn't know that? Oh. Yeah, Mormons believe that, like Jesus, they believe in Jesus, and so they call themselves Christians, but Jesus is simply the first kid of God that was born, and the rest of us are all his children, and so we will all eventually be raised into godhood and get our own planets and stuff. At least the men will. I'm not sure if the women get their own planet. Yeah, Rialto, I don't know why Rialto has a really big Mormon population, so I got to grow up. Yeah, Rialto's like little Utah. I had tons of Mormon friends growing up, so we argued about that stuff all the time. But existentialism is can you come to grips with the limits of life? Can you come to grips with the fact that you're going to age, there'll be deficits as you age, and eventually you'll die, and then who knows what happens after the end of our earthly existence. And that's a really scary thought. Like, the longer you dwell on it, it can freak you out. It can cause anxiety. And existentialists believe that if we cannot come to grips with the fact that we will die eventually, that it will cause mental health issues. It will cause anxiety, and we will do sort of like defensive mechanisms to protect ourselves from the fear of death. So, for instance, the midlife crisis. Existentialists say that the reason why we have the midlife crisis, why, the classic midlife crisis, a man leaves his wife, buys a convertible, and gets into a relationship with an 18-year-old. Why does that happen? Because it does happen. It's not super common, but it does happen. Well, because when you hit your 40s, and when you hit midlife, all of a sudden, you can't ignore the fact that, yes, you are getting older, and that, 40 is 50, that life you're on the downhill slope towards death now, right? When you're in your 20s, it's really hard to think about that you're going to die someday. But the older you get, the easier it is to think about, like my grandma's 83. She'll be lucky to get another 10 years out of your life. Like, can you imagine looking at your life and saying, I could easily be dead in the next few years? Right? It's uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable. So existentialists say that discomfort makes us react in a lot of ways, some unhealthy ways, of trying to cope with it, trying to ignore it. So I'm feeling old, I'm realizing that death is closer, and so now I try to act like a young stud by getting a convertible and trading my wife in for a younger model. And women have similar, reactionary, well, not similar, but we also react to the fact that death is imminent as well in certain ways. So anyhow, that's existential philosophy. So Gardner said there's a type of existential intelligence, understanding of what is our point in the world, a spiritual type of intelligence. Like how do we interact in the world in a harmonious way, recognizing spiritual influences. You might, like a religious leader, hopefully a good religious leader would have high existential intelligence. They're really able to help you cope with those sorts of existential realities and understand what the point of life is through a faith type of setting. Does that make sense? So
do
some,
cult leaders.
what was that?
So do cult leaders.
Cult leaders, yes. Cult leaders do. They're very good at that. Cult leaders have that linguistic intelligence also, that's emotional speech making. They're usually very good at that. I don't think they're helping you cope in a healthy way. But so why do people say existential intelligence is maybe not a true intelligence? They argue that it's simply intrapersonal, understanding yourself and your place in the world. But I really think spirituality is another level. It's not just yourself, it's kind of who you are in relationship to the universe around you, sort of thing. So I agree with Gardner that it's a unique type of intelligence, because it's almost like understanding yourself in relationship to the world around you and the people around you. So
It's like mixing two to one.
yeah, mixing the two together, yeah. All right, so that's Gardner, and I often think like it's a garden of intelligences, if that helps, so multiple different types. And unlike Carroll and Spearman, they said, yes, there's different specific skills of intelligences, but they're all based on the general intelligence. And Gardner said, no, they are unique, separate intelligences, and their functioning is not based on the functioning of any other type of intelligence. Okay. Sternberg was a bit more practical. He said there's three types of intelligence: analytical, practical, and creative. And that it's sort of like a triangle. So you have analytical, practical, creative, and we all fall somewhere on the continuum. Like we might be slightly more analytical and creative. Like my older sister, super, actually she's more like here, not analytical, practical. I've always said, like, if the spaceship breaks, they could call it my sister and she could come up with a solution to fix it. Men find her super threatening. She's like, you fixed that lawnmower wrong. Let me show you how to do this. She's hilarious. But she's so good. She got a degree in college for woodworking and furniture design, so she's very hands-on and super good at figuring things out, and she's very artistic about it as well. So she's got a lot of creativity, a lot of practical. But Sternberg said that you lose out on one or the other the more specialized you become. So if you're very analytic, then you may not be super practical and you may not be super creative. So think about like a tax person, like somebody doing your taxes. They're really good at that analysis, but they may not, like, they can't fix their own plumbing, and creativity is like, why do we need to be creative? Let's just stick to these numbers.
Starts and ends with an abacus.
Yeah. And then if you have a bit of both, you're very centered, then you're not super good at any of those. You're sort of moderately creative, moderately analytical, moderately practical. So it's an interesting theory.
And you lose out on one intelligence when you focus on another.
Right. The more specialized you are, the more you lose out on the other two. So really for my sister, because she's practical and creative, she might be over there. She's very practical, and then, I don't know, someone moderately
creative than analytical.
Yeah. Maybe somewhere in there. And I'm thinking she'd probably be insulted if I didn't put her directly between creative and practical. And the research supports this because you only have so many neurons in your head. Like you have a limited amount of brain capacity, And the more specialized you become, the more neurons get dedicated to that area. And you can't just produce more neurons. It doesn't work that way. You have the neurons you have. If you're smoking pot or doing whatever, you're losing those neurons. So you can lose some, but you can't get more. It's sort of like, has anybody played a role-playing game where you have to build your own character? Any nerds like me out there? Okay, great, awesome. One nerd
I
over
went
there, two
LARPing.
nerds. What was that? You went LARPing? Wow, I admire you. If you don't know what LARPing is, sorry, you guys are not in the nerd club, I feel bad for you. Live action role-playing. So when you build a character, for those, if you don't want to admit you're a nerd, that's okay, just listen. But you get a certain amount of character points. So you can put so many points towards like strength, intelligence, charisma, whatever. But those are the points you have, and you could become a specialist, you could sort of be mediocre in everything. And that's how our brain works too. We have a certain amount of neurons that can specialize and then you lose out, or you can become moderately good in everything and you don't become a specialist. And that's why sometimes you see the very highly intelligent people aren't good with their social skills, for instance. Like Sheldon on Big Bang Theory. Because he put so many brain neurons towards science, there weren't enough left to be really good at the other areas. And the better he gets at socializing, and there's actually some episodes where he talks about this, that the better he gets at interacting with people, he's losing his science skills. And there's actually some truth to that. It's not going to be an extreme change, but there will be some of it. So, okay. So that's Sternberg. Blah, blah, blah. You can look at that later. So let's go back to development a little bit. When we talk about the infant developing this intelligence, we don't call it an IQ when a baby is born. We call it a DQ. So that's a developmental quotient. So the Bailey scale of infant development is the most commonly used one. And they use things like like the motor skill. Can kids manipulate things with their hands? Can they grasp things well? Can they pick up an object that is difficult to get and requires some finesse? How good are their motor skills? Mental skill, can they adapt? Like if you put a toy out that they want, can they figure out how to get to it, especially if there's some obstacles in the way? And then the behavior rating skills, so do they have goals? Are they able to emotionally regulate themselves? So if they get upset, can they calm themselves down? And how good are they at responding to social cues? So that's what this measures. And the score is the developmental quotient, or how well the infant performs in comparison to all the other infants. Now, this is interesting, but it doesn't strongly predict future IQ. So it's not the best test out there. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. It is the best test out there, but there aren't very good tests for predicting infant intelligence. And that might be because intelligence is not solely based on genetics. So if you are testing the intelligence of an infant, you are purely testing genetics because there's limited environmental impact by 2 months old. There's a little bit, but not a huge amount. Probably, from what I understand, is that social responsiveness and emotional regulation are the 2 best predictors of future child intelligence, but it's still not a strong predictor at all. The reason why we still use this scale is because it is really good at seeing if children's development is normal. If it is super slow, then that is a predictor of low intelligence. It's hard to predict high intelligence, but we can see that there's problems if the children are not developing their motor skills and their emotional skills and everything on time. But it's still hard to say. Even if you develop it on time, that doesn't mean your kid's a genius. And even if it's a little bit ahead of time, it doesn't necessarily mean that your kid is a genius. So it's better at predicting low IQ than high IQ. So low or no correlation, depending on the study, between infant DQ and child IQ. So if somebody tries to test your kid's DQ, don't worry too much about it. The best predictors are the attention span. This is the #1 predictor. How well can your baby pay attention to things? And more importantly, how quickly do they get bored? The smarter somebody is, the easier it is for them to get bored. which is why many people don't make it all the way through the doctoral dissertation because it's so freaking boring to do. Once the fun of it wears off, can you keep working? And smart people get bored faster. So that's one of the disadvantages of being smart, is that it can be really hard to stick to something if it's boring. Or you take a class that's horribly boring. You may be very unmotivated. Or you get too much homework and busy work. Right? It can be very boring. So like when I graduated high school, I had a 3.0, which isn't terrible, but I certainly was capable of getting a better grade. But it was boring, and I didn't want to do my homework. I already have the information down. I don't need to study this for hours after school. And my mom was like, why do your homework? If you can pass the class, go outside and play. That's my mom's attitude. If I had had an Asian mom, it might have been a different story. Sit down, do your homework. I don't care how bored you are. So it's sort of like if you look at Mozart and Beethoven. Mozart was like genius, super gifted sort of person. And Beethoven was high intelligence, but he was not in the gifted intelligence range. So they both wrote amazing pieces. But Mozart wasn't good at working hard. For instance, there's one story where he was commissioned to write an opera. Some noble person had paid him to write an opera. And the very next day, rehearsals were supposed to start. And the noble person had commissioned the art and the backdrop and the props. The actors were already paid, and they were scheduled to show up the next day. And Mozart had not written the opera. And the patron came in and threw a fit, and I've paid so much money. I have no music from you. What are we supposed to do? I'm going to be out, tons of money. And he said, oh, it's already written. I just haven't written it down yet. So he had an entire 3-hour-long opera in his head, and so he just spent the night writing down the notes. But it was boring. That was the boring part, so he didn't want to do it. Okay, that was Mozart. Mozart was a genius. Beethoven, on the other hand, he wrote and rewrote and crumbled it up and threw it, and he'd lock himself in his room for weeks on end just trying to get this music out. So he had to work really hard. Now, they both came up with obviously amazing masterpieces, but it's a different type of intelligence. So Mozart is what we would call gifted, whereas Beethoven was just high intelligence. Okay, and then reaction time. How quickly does your baby react to things? Like if you put a new object in their face, how quickly do they turn to look at it? And that is also a predictor of high intelligence. It's a weak predictor, but it is the best. Those are the two best predictors that we have out there. And then social responsiveness and emotional regulation are like the next two strongest. And these are the correlations themselves. So remember 0 to 1, 1 being the strongest, 0 being no correlation. So if you test the IQ of a child, this is not DQ, this is IQ, at 4 years old, it's a 0.46 correlation with their IQ at 9 and 0.42 at 12. So that is a moderately weak correlation. So if your kid does not seem all that smart at 4, don't freak out, because there's a lot of development that happens between 4 and 10. Now, if you measure a kid's IQ at 7, there's a 0.81 correlation at 9, slightly lower 0.69 correlation at 12. So there's really no point in testing kids' IQs at a young age.
They do get gait testing at 7.
Gait testing is not IQ testing. So gait testing is
How kid learns best.
it's
Ways.
trying to figure out how does the kid learn. Because this is like, remember I said there's high intelligence and then there's gifted.
Right.
And the gifted student is the Mozart one, and they learn different. So the average person, IQ of 100, takes 7 times of being exposed to something for them to learn it. That's the average. The high intelligent person takes 3 times, and a gifted person takes once. And they only need to be exposed once to learn it. So imagine how bored a gifted kid would be in a regular class.
Right.
And gifted children are also, they tend to be more troublemakers, probably because they get bored so easily. So, for instance, I was in the GATE program when I was a kid, and we had a substitute once who nobody liked, and me and my other best friend, this was in 4th grade, we literally led a rebellion in the class. We mutinied against the teacher. That's what gifted kids do. right? We had a walkout, we had a strike in 4th grade. So gifted children, a lot of people see the GATE program as, oh, these kids have been given something special, and that's why they have their own class. But they've actually been removed from the normal classroom for the protection of the normal intelligence kids because
they're not removed anymore. They're in
I
the
know they're
classroom.
mainstream, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
And then we have to have a different something for them
Mhm.
to work on.
right.
in a
Which
different
I
way.
personally don't think is fair to either the gifted or to the regular intelligence kids. Because, I mean, I talked to a teacher once about that, and she said, well, if you let the regular kids begin with the gifted kids, then the gifted kids will inspire them to work harder. And I'm like, not the gifted kids I knew. Like, that's not how, that's
I
not
will
how
stage a
they mind.
walkout.
Right, they have a walkout. They torture those kids, because now class has been slowed down for the normal kids. Now I'm bored. Now I'm thinking what I could do in this class with my time, and now there's all sorts of behavioral disruption. So that's not fair to either set of children. So that was the original purpose of the GATE program, was to separate these troublemaking kids so that they could learn at the rate that was appropriate for them, so the other kids could also learn at the rate that was appropriate for them. So, yeah. So this is why we have to understand normal development, because otherwise we screw things up because some politician gets involved. Politicians are always screwing things up.
Politicians always know what's right?
Right, yeah. Okay, so DQs does not predict later IQ. Did we already talk about all this? Let's see. So one thing is that children's IQ goes like this as they develop. Okay? So if you chart it out, as they're getting older, their score is going to go like this. So depending on what age, what point in their life, what's going on emotionally in their life, nutritionally, if they're having a growth spurt or not, then that's going to change their IQ. So at some point, the kid's IQ will be high, it may go back down, it may go up again. So, and that's because there's so much physiological change happening in that development, especially prior to elementary school, which, by the way, supports Freud's idea of the latency period. By elementary school age, those waves in development have slowed down and they're much less dramatic. And so now the brain is more stable, you're more able to focus on academics. And then the change differs considerably from child to child. So some children, they may have dramatic increases while others are going flat, and some may drop way more than others. And emotional issues in life affects IQ tremendously at this age. It's not as much for adults, but if you get a divorce, your kid's IQ is going to drop if it gets tested. It'll show a considerable drop in IQ. Now, as the kid ages, then that drop in IQ will level back out. But for some reason, and probably because emotions and change your brain neurochemistry, and that changes neuronal connections, and which is your IQ. So don't get divorced, especially your kids. Okay, that's pretty much it. Now, some of the other things that cause these gains and losses, talked about an unstable home environment, so divorce, abuse, those are all major issues. If you immigrate to another country, like you move from Haiti. Now, why did you guys move, if you don't mind me asking?
Once in Italy,
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say the first 3 years my parents were together in America, they got divorced.
Okay, so you had a lot of instability when you were a kid.
Oh
Yeah.
I did this and that to whatever.
Right. So then if you had been tested as a child, you may have shown a lower IQ than the other kids because of that emotional instability. Now, that does not mean that you have a lower IQ now than your peers. But in childhood, this is why it's so hard to judge a kid's true IQ, because they're so affected by the emotional, psychological environment. So if you immigrate and you go from one nice environment to another, you see less of a drop. If you're going from a traumatic sort of environment, poverty, war, whatever, then you see a tremendous drop in IQ. Poverty is a huge, statistically significant drop in IQ. One researcher, he had this cumulative deficit hypothesis. So poverty in itself is not going to make you stupid. But you're living in poverty, you're living in a bad area in poverty, there's drug use in your house, your family falls apart, you get tossed into the foster care system, all of these things combined, there will be a cumulative deficit. And that is what's going to affect intelligence long term.
I got tossed in foster care too.
Yeah, so you have had an uphill battle as a child. Yeah. So now those negative effects may accumulate over time. Now there could also be protective factors too. So again, just because somebody grows up poor doesn't mean they're screwed for life. You look at Serena and Venus Williams, and they're super mega rich, famous sports stars, and they grew up in Compton. But they had a great dad who was supportive. They had people in their life who
They were always on the court.
always on the court. They had things to do. They had future goals. So even though they grew up in this poverty-stricken area, they had protective factors that made up for that. Children whose IQ scores increase have specific characteristics too. They have parents who foster achievement and are neither too strict nor too permissive. Okay, so that authoritarian type of parenting. So your parents want you to achieve. For instance, in my family, we never ask a kid, are you going to go to college? And this is my mom's tradition, she started asking, what are you going to get your doctorate in when you go to doctoral school? So, and she sort of asked that, or are you going to get a doctorate? That was the expectation, really. So it was like, maybe, like if you don't want to get a doctorate, that's okay, but you're at least going to get a master's degree. Like, of course you'd get a master's degree. It was just expected. There's no question about it. And I have a master's degree. My little sister has a master's degree. And my oldest sister has 2 master's degrees. So it's just how it was. I'm the only sister with a doctorate. So there's some competitiveness with that. I told him, like, don't do it. It's not worth it. It's too stressful. It is worth it, but it is hard. So parents that are neither too strict nor too lax. If you're too strict, then that drops your kid's IQ tremendously. Permissive is actually a little bit better than being strict, but it's still not good for the kid. So you need to have strong rules about certain things and then be relaxed about the stuff that's not that important. Any questions about that? No? Okay. Now, as we grow, the IQ continues to increase until the mid-40s, and then we see a slight decline. Now, there are exceptions to that. If you stay in an academic, intellectual career that you have to use your brain, then you don't see much of a decline until retirement. Then it starts to decline. So it's not age as much as the fact that we're just not using our brain. If you're not reading books, if you're not doing things with your life, if you're not thinking, then your IQ will start to drop. And the reason is because the neurons start to disconnect. If it's not being used, just get rid of it. Now you can reconnect those if you wanted. You could start reading books, you could go to an interesting lecture, you could take a college class again, even as an adult.
And that's not the same as pruning then, right? Because pruning would be completely, like you lose your pathways to learning a language.
No, it
and
is
being
pruning, yeah.
completely fluent in that language or having the accent for that language.
Yeah, I mean, some neurons disconnect entirely. So you've got, 2 neurons, or, cluster of neurons, and you have all of these connections between them, So if you, let's say you haven't read a book in the past 20 years, since you're 40 years old, you've never read a book, never done anything intellectual, then these connections will start to disappear and go away, and that is pruning. Now, some connections, I mean, when a teacher erases a neuronal connection, an axon dendrite connection, it makes it look like it's completely gone. But what's really happening is you have these connections and they move away from each other. And so now it's too hard for them to communicate, so you lose that thinking. So if the connections have been made before, then unless it's been completely like I've taken this over and reconnected it somewhere else and now it's not available for connection, then if it's still close by, it's very easy for the brain to reconnect things. So that's why you can learn something, then you can't remember it, but when you refresh yourself with the information, you remember it a lot quicker. because the connection was still there, it just had been disconnected.
But there are some things though that you can just forget about. Right?
Yes, and never remember. Yeah, absolutely.
Music, maybe learning to play an instrument at a later age will never be as, fluid as maybe.
There's debate on how plastic that means flexible, how flexible the brain is. It's much easier to make these connections when you're young. So it would take more effort as an adult to learn a foreign language or a musical instrument. But there are many instances of adults learning those things and being great in it. There's musicians who started as an adult and are fantastic. It just takes a bit more effort to get those connections made. But it's not impossible by any means.
I'm just not saying a 40 or 50-year-old picking up an instrument and being like,
But it's possible.
a
It's just
monster
not- yeah.
bass player or guitar player.
I did know
because-
somebody who started playing the flute at 40, and he was fantastic. He's really good, and he plays professionally now. And he never played an instrument before that.
How much time do you put into it?
A lot.
Right.
yeah.
No, I mean,
More time
that's
than
the
I put
question.
into it.
10,000 hours.
Yeah, he, it's a weird story. He decided he wanted to play the flute. He wanted to be a professional jazz flautist. And he retired from his job, and he used that money to support himself for 2 years while he locked himself in his house and practiced the flute every single day. He said he played for like 10 hours a day. And he's making money. He has a career as a musician now.
And then maybe that was part of his genetic inheritance or something.
Possibly, yeah, absolutely. Because music is genetic. It runs in families. I think everybody's capable of doing music, but some people are more, it comes a lot easier to them. Yeah. Like Mozart wrote his first symphony at, I think, 5 years old or something like that, which is crazy. He was playing chords on the piano at 2. Like, I can barely play chords now after a career in music. So, all right, let's see. So it begins to decline steeply around 80. That is generally because of health issues, not because age naturally makes you stupid. So if you look at the average, so when you turn, it's doing good up until 40, and then 80, it starts to decline. Because around this age, around 80, is when the tremendous amount of health problems start to come out. So if you average in Alzheimer's, the various forms of dementia, diabetes, heart disease, all of these issues that can affect your brain, then of course you're going to see a tremendous drop in IQ, because those health issues have a tremendous increase around 80. Now, if you take out all of the unhealthy 80-year-olds, you don't see that decline in IQ. Okay, so again, it's not age itself that's the problem, it's the fact that you're unhealthy that's the problem. So this is the problem with correlation, right? So if it's not age that's causing it, there's a third factor that's causing it.
So then you can say that to the people that's like, oh, my brain can't take it anymore, I can't learn anything else. So you can tell them that if you try.
Yes. Yeah, the older you get, the harder it is to learn new information, because these neurons don't move as easily.
So there are most people who don't have the patience for it.
Right, they don't have the patience, they don't have the desire. I've already
Settle.
gone through my education. Yeah, they just settle for it. But if you're determined, I'm going to learn this information, then no matter how old you are, you can.
So I'm gonna tell them.
Yeah, you tell them that. Tell them you're my professor. Okay. So verbal IQ changes the least. Okay, as you get older, you lose very little of your verbal IQ. Performance IQ peaks around 20 to 24, and then declines after that. Okay. Why is that?
You don't perform as much. Yeah,
You don't perform as much. How many of you are going to be using advanced algebra, geometry, trigonometry, calculus once you get out of college? I don't. What are you planning on doing with your life?
Firefighter,
Firefighter. So you're going to be using calculus and...
engineers required to.
Oh, so you're going to be doing engineering. Okay. Yeah, so if you go into engineering, if you're a math teacher, you're an astronaut, something like that, then you will be using math every single day, and you will maintain your performance IQ. The rest of us will probably not do more than Algebra 1 level stuff for the rest of our life as soon as we're out of college. So again, our brain says, why are we wasting energy maintaining this connection? We can use it for something else. And so it disconnects it, and now you lose that ability to remember how to do like logarithmic, whatever crap in calculus, I don't know. Last time I took calculus was high school, so those disconnections were barely connected then, and they're totally gone now. So all I remember is how much I hated the class. Okay, so it's not age. It's the fact that you're not using it once you get out of college that causes this decline. If you look at engineers, you do not see that decline. Okay, and this is the chart. But this is the average IQ with verbal and performance together. So if you looked at verbal, there would not be as much of a decline. If you only looked at performance, you would see the decline starting here, and it would be more dramatic. If you only looked at engineers, then you wouldn't see that decline until retirement age. So you'd usually start seeing it somewhere, in this area where it would start to decline.
So you're saying that once you start picking it up, your synapses and neurons can start to
Connect.
reconnect.
Yes. Reconnect, yeah.
And then you can strengthen your skills again, you're sharpening your tools.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Sort of like riding a bicycle. If you have not ridden a bicycle in years, then it's awkward when you get on the bike again. You're like, oh crap, how do I do this? And then within 10 seconds, you got it back again. Because for some reason, bicycles, that motor movement, when the neurons disconnect, they only slightly disconnect. Yeah, I forgot that, but it's not really that much of a disconnection. So it takes split second for your astrocytes to come and move those connections together again so that you can remember how to move your body to do that. Okay. Now, if you injure yourself, so for instance, when I broke my arm, when they took the cast off, it was the weirdest thing. Actually, it was so weird, it made me nauseous and dizzy because all of a sudden, I'm trying to move my thumb and it's not doing anything. I literally, no matter how mentally hard I tried, and it was so anxiety-producing, okay, hold on. I gotta take a break here. It's freaky. It's a really weird experience. And that's because the inactivity of moving your arm, and possibly the damage, especially if you hit your brain, then these neurons have disconnected. Okay? And in my case, they disconnected pretty seriously from all that inactivity, and so it took practice in order to get that movement back. And now I have most of the movement back in my hand. It still feels my thumb's still a little bit weak. But luckily, when you play the flute, you don't use your thumb very much, so I got really lucky with that. Okay, and by the way, astrocytes, do you guys know what that is? No? It's weird. You have these little star-shaped, that's why astrophysicist, some astronaut, it's star-shaped cell, and they will grab your neurons and they move them all over the place. So we have all these creepy crawly cells moving around in our brain, dragging neurons around and connecting and disconnecting them. Weird, huh? Have you guys ever seen a video of a neuron connect or disconnect? No? Okay, let me see if I can find one.
That reminds me of that cartoon I used to watch called All the Injuries.
Oh, yeah?
It's kids and you just
My brain's
Yeah.
been
Let's see. Yep, here we go. This is the weirdest thing ever. So this is literally learning taking place. Weird, huh?
Yeah, wow. Well, where's that little star Astion?
They're small, so it's hard to. You'd have to have a more powerful microscope to see it.
Wow, they're like little alien things.
Yes, right? And that's happening in your brain all the time.
When you're learning?
When you're learning, yep. And then this is forgetting. So this is pruning or the disconnection. So did you see a disconnect? So that person just forgot something. So this is the pruning. So see that connection right there? It goes right across here. I'll rewind it. So right across there, that connection.
Yes, oh.
So it just pruned that connection. So that person just forgot something.
Ooh, I would love to show this to my kids. That is so
Yeah?
interesting.
Yeah, just on YouTube, just search for neuronal connection or neuron connecting.
Do they have one on people people that smoke marijuana when they're doing brain?
Yeah, not a video, but I could find a picture probably. That's just another connection happening. And it happens fast. Those are new thoughts being made. How weird is that, huh?
New thoughts, huh? That's not picking up your instrument and learning it.
It could be.
It could.
It could be reconnecting something that, yeah.
In 28 days.
Yep.
Guaranteed to make a new person.
Yeah.
Let's see.
20 hours.
Let me see if I can just find a picture real quick.
Say it was like we're tested today.
If anything bad comes up, I'm sorry.
Really healthy.
Halfway seems to be made now.
Yeah, it's not coming up. I'll have to find something.
What do you think about being able to telepathically, is that a possibility, do you think, with brainwaves and?
It's theoretically possible. Obviously, there's no real proof of it yet, but yeah, I mean, brain waves are real electronic, transmissions of our thoughts. There's been some interesting research done on prayer that shows that there is a significant effect on like health if somebody is praying for you.
Yeah.
There's also some research that didn't find that though, so it's still a really
Balancing it.
yeah. So when there's research saying something is proven and research saying it's disproven, then it's probably a methodological issue. So there's something wrong with the methods. Well, either somebody's lying or there's something wrong with the methods. So it could be that maybe there's certain types of prayer that are effective. Maybe there's certain types of people. Like if you're Christian, you would assume that a non-Christian's prayer wouldn't work as well as a Christian. So it's possible that something like that could be affecting it. Could also be that the methods that found an effect were bad and there is no effect. So it's just a lot of research shows yes and no to certain things, and you just have to do more research to establish what's really going on. But it's interesting. It's really interesting. And one of the theories is that the brain waves that are released when you pray somehow is affecting the person you're praying for. It could be it. Could be something else entirely. We don't know, but
Because it is energy.
yeah. I mean, you can look at like the idea of an aura. Auras are real. You can look on. I don't remember the instrument that they use, but they can see the electrical energy aura that people have.
The chakras, is that what they?
Yeah, it's sort of what they mean by chakra. Now, does an aura really mean what some of these like New Age philosophies think of auras? Maybe, maybe not. But there is, in a sense, there is an aura around everybody. We do have, we are electric, and everything that's electric produces an electric sort of circle around us. So it's interesting. Right. We need to do a lot more research in life. Yeah, I'm going to have to look for the picture. I've seen pictures of the brain and neurons before and after marijuana. There is some damage that marijuana causes. Obviously, it's not as bad as like cocaine, but what do you think? Yeah, well, and there is some truth to that. Methamphetamine gives you energy. You get a lot done when you're on meth, but that doesn't mean that there's no side effects to it, right? I mean, and that's not to say, even if there are side effects to it, that's not to say that it's not necessarily a useful drug. I mean, how many of you have taken Vicodin, Norco, morphine, any painkiller? Right? You guys have all done legal medicinal heroin.
Adderall.
Adderall is an amphetamine. Yeah, if you've taken Adderall or Ritalin for ADD, you've taken methamphetamine. It's the same. This chemical structure is slightly different, but it's the same drug.
What am I looking at there where it says cannabinoids remove plaque forming Alzheimer's proteins from brain cells? Or plaque forming Alzheimer's
I don't know if there's research behind that or not. Yeah, I don't know.
That's it. There's something good, there's something bad.
Yeah,
know?
and
I don't
there's
know.
nothing.
Pros and cons.
Coffee's good, coffee's bad. I don't know.
Yes.
Should I drink it
I
this
mean,
morning? Should I not?
Caffeine is a drug. it's not the strongest drug out there, so there's generally not repercussions. But you drink too much caffeine and it can cause miscarriage or prevent you from getting pregnant. That's something that's proven by research.
But in other countries, people live to drink coffee. Like
Yes,
maybe
and in-
for breakfast we have coffee with bread and butter. If you don't,
But that doesn't mean it's not affecting you negatively. It could
Okay.
be. We'd have to do research to see for sure. But like Europe, the French love coffee. They drink a lot of coffee. And so, but we don't see any negative side effects. But that could also be because they're very healthy in a lot of other ways, like a lot of vegetable eating and things like that. So it could be that, yes, there's a problems being caused by the caffeine, but it's being balanced out by the rest of their health.
can
That's-
it give you anxiety?
Caffeine? Oh, yeah. I mean, caffeine can make you look like a tweaker, just like if you were using methamphetamine. Just go to Starbucks, right? It's like 7 o'clock in the morning. They're
And
like, hello, how are you
observe.
doing? Good morning. It's like, just stop. Give me my coffee before you're that cheerful and talking that fast. Yeah. My mom in biology actually had a student that I thought was tweaking. And I'm like, are you sure she's not using, like she looks like she's a meth user. Super thin, and picking at her skin like a meth user. It was terrible. And I said, you might want to talk to her because is she high in your class? Like, what's going on? And she said, no, she talked to me about this, and she eats coffee beans all day long,
wow.
and she's addicted. She said she's going to like an outpatient rehab thing for caffeine addiction.
Oh, was that your story?
Yeah, that's her
Oh.
story. And nursing student, by the way, so if you see her in the hospital, ask for another nurse. But I don't know if she ever got off of the caffeine or not, but it is addictive. Sugar, very addictive. Sugar works on your opioid receptors in your brain, which is the same thing heroin works on.
Yeah.
So,
I told my mom that the other day. She was like, "Oh," I was like, "Yeah."
mhm.
Please stop.
Yep.
Sugar.
So we all eat too much sugar in this country.